Bring back the unions. Hi, I'm John McNeil, and this is the Invest Strong Network. Welcome. One of the biggest problems facing our society and our economy in this point in the 21st century is the enormous disparity between those who can make a living wage and those whose labors continue to keep them on the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder. Now, this has caused all kind of consternation in Washington and in state houses around the country, right? So we have the government talking about expanding healthcare coverage to cover persons whose employer will not offer it, or persons who are working part-time. You have persons screaming for $15 an hour across the board minimum wage. You have persons that are demanding paid family leave for their employees and that the government make it mandatory. You have all these things kind of going on confluently. Now, all of these things are in fact part of a singular problem that has basically been beguiling our economy and our society really since the end of the Second World War, but certainly accelerated dramatically in the 1980s. And that is a government campaign to smash, destroy, diminish the power of private sector unions. Now, when I say unions, private sector unions, we're basically talking about unions that operate in the private sector of the economy. We're not talking about government unions. I'm not talking about police unions or fire unions or teachers unions or anything like that. No, we're talking about private sector for-profit companies and industries that utilize that in previous times had some kind of union affiliation. Now, the corporate class, capitalist class, the wealthy, right? They have been on an extraordinarily aggressive propaganda campaign in the last 70 years, and again, ramped up dramatically in the last 40 years to highlight the excesses of the union movement, right? So whenever a company was trying to, or an industry is trying to smash the unions, they would bring up points like these labor pools where unions work out contracts that basically force the company to pay workers to sit around and do nothing, right? And that brings outrage, in the broader community. Or they'll even talk about how these union bosses perhaps have, mafia connections and organized crime tentacles involved in them, right? And they will also talk about how these unions make American industries less competitive compared to Asian or Latin American or even European companies, right? All of this, in my opinion, is just total propaganda, right? Because when you look at each one of those things, these were negotiations that, let's take, for example, the labor pool thing. These were negotiations done in good faith by unions with management that allows workers to be paid even when demand for the particular product has decreased. Now, that may seem unreasonable to some people. Say, well, hey, if business declined, then perhaps they shouldn't be paid as much. But wait, when business increases and profits begin to soar, which oftentimes they did, the contracts call for the union members to get paid the same amount, right? So, the corporate class, the capitalists, they're basically saying, well, this is costing us, untold amounts of profits. or untold amounts of resources on the low end, and then they ignore the mammoth profits they make on the high end from the same contract, right? Ingenious propaganda. Now, the organized crime connections. Well, that's an interesting aspect because although historically there had been some organized crime connections, mafia connections with unions and their bosses, Jimmy Hoffa, uh, but the reality is many of the corporate leaders also have organized crime connections, right? And many of them have also been convicted of corruption and embezzlement and doing unlawful things and have ended up in prison, right? But you see, they don't highlight that in their propaganda, right? And then, of course, there's the issue of competitiveness. Now, they say these unions have historically made American industry less competitive. But wait, when you compare it to Europe or even Asia, Japan, China, the Chinese economy is often state supported, and so you can't really have an apples to apples comparison there. Actually, in Europe, they have lots of unions, and the unions are very strong, and the unions are government connected, and thus these European workers, they have living wages, they have full medical benefits, they have 6 months of 6 weeks rather of annual family leave. They also get the entire month of August off every month, just about. You see, and that makes for a competitive and an industry with workers that are highly motivated and with high morale to be loyal to their jobs, right? And quite frequently, the corporate people they leave that out. Now, the corporate class they have had allies in this war on unions, and those allies, let's just be honest, have been mostly Republicans, right? Both in Washington and in the state legislatures across the country, right? They have done just about everything they can to smash unions, to restrain their ability to collective bargain or to gain memberships or to finance themselves through collecting union dues. They do all kind of things to strike the unions, and and frequently these politicians will wrap their opposition to unions in this idea that unions are not a part of the free market system, that they are some kind of socialist holdover, and we need to purge the socialism from the American body and go with a pure capitalist class economy. That also is totally false. Unions, private sector unions, are as much of a part of the economic structure of a free market system as the capitalist class who put up the money and build the factories, right? And these mostly Republican, but not entirely, but mostly Republican politicians have bought into the propaganda of the corporate class, the capitalist class, if you will, that unions represent some kind of socialist underbelly in the American economy and the American society writ large, right? That needs to end, and it needs to end quickly, because unless we want the government coming in with fiats constantly uh, commanding what people are to be paid, what benefits must be offered, and things like that. Unless we want the government to do that, the best way to counter that is to have unions that represent laborers who will go to management and say, hey, this is what we are demanding for all of our workers, right? That to me seems to be the better way to go. The Biden administration seems to be moving in that direction, right? Now, they're taking baby steps, right? But they seem to be heading in that direction. And that's good. I give them credit for that. But we need to get going here because in many of these companies, that make billions and billions of dollars in profit, right? They pay their workers almost nothing because they basically will not allow their workers to be involved with unions, and they are aided and abetted by by partners in government, mostly Republicans, and that basically forces the government to pick up the social costs of their workers while allowing these mammoth corporations to continue to bank up billions in profits a year. That has to end, my friends. That has to end, right? And so we'll see how that goes. I certainly hope that that the Biden administration continues to go in this direction. They'll hopefully challenge all of these rules and laws that prevent collective bargaining or that stop unions from being able to recruit members or stop them from being able to collect dues and things like that. These unions, they need money to operate just like any organization, and if they can't collect dues because the government or the industry will not allow them to collect dues, then obviously they can't really operate, right? And again, that needs to end. All right. So those are my thoughts for this week. If you found them insightful, if you agree, or even if you disagree, right, let me know in the comments. I want to know what your thoughts and experiences on unions are. I'd really appreciate it. Also, hit that thumbs up button. Yay, thumbs up. I love it. And of course, subscribe to Invest Strong. Whether you are a union or not a union member, subscribe to Invest Strong, and I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much, friends, and good blessings.